Oh yeah, it's double organic.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in for another dose of vitamin D with me, Double Organic. Just want to give you a little quick intro before you watch the lecture by Alan Goldhamer. In case you don't know who he is, he does water fasting and plant-based nutrition counseling at True North Health Center in California, and he's healed thousands of people. He'll go over that in his lecture. It's a little bit dark, the video quality of him. He's just a little silhouette because it was dark in the room and he was doing a slideshow presentation. And also my camera, it cuts out every 20 minutes, it just shuts off and I start filming again. And so you miss like 2 or 3 seconds, no big deal. So you're gonna get everything out of the video. You don't actually miss any of the content. And also, I think you'll appreciate his sense of humor. So tune in. I think it's a really interesting lecture, and I hope you like the video.
A couple of words real quick and get us started. I'm here to introduce Dr. Alan Goldhamer, who is a 1983 UWS Western States Chiropractic College alumni, and is currently works at True North Health, which is in Santa Rosa, California. This is an integrated healthcare practice with a focus on nutrition and medical fasting. He's going to be here to discuss his practice and the things he's been working on of late. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Goldhamer.
Thank you for coming today. It's interesting that as a country we spend about $3 trillion on healthcare, about 2.5 times as much as our colleagues in the European Union. And you'd expect if you spend that much money, we'd be getting something for it. We should be healthier, have a higher life expectancy perhaps, or perhaps even more importantly, a higher healthy life expectancy. Difference being life expectancy, how long you're expected to live at birth, healthy life expectancy of those years, how many of them are going to be fully functional and vital. We lag in both. Some people suggest perhaps we're not spending our money in exactly the right ways. Healthy life expectancy in the United States average about 78, healthy life expectancy about 69. People are spending somewhere over 9 years debilitated. 17 years on average unhealthy. Most of the healthcare costs actually happen in those final decades. We're not going to live forever, but we can dramatically improve how well we live while we're alive. Of the 109 billion people that have been born on the planet, that is modern humans, and the 7.5 billion that are alive today, we have well-documented evidence that 5 have lived past 117. Odds of going to beyond 117 currently are less than 1 in 20 billion. Chances are greater that patients are going to live less than that. And the question is, of the years they're going to live, how well are they going to live? We know that the ultimate leading cause of death right now, heart disease, cancer, and stroke, and that's what most of the medical profession is spent trying to address. But what we should be asking is, what are the actual causes of those leading causes of death? The actual causes are the use of tobacco, alcohol, and poor dietary choices. We might be better off putting our effort, our money, and our resources into addressing the actual causes of disease rather than just the leading causes of disease. We know that smoking leads the list still. It does such a good job killing people prematurely. But high blood pressure isn't far behind. It's a condition now so common that if your patients don't have hypertension by the time they're 65, they're actually abnormal. So the normal or average effect is to be hypertensive. The other ultimate cause of death, according to the CDC, use of alcohol, high animal food intake, being overweight, not eating fruits and vegetables, lack of access to illicit drugs, and unsafe sex. None of which, of course, are deficiency diseases, all of which are conditions of excess. Today, about 80% of the people you're likely to see in any given day in a general practice have metabolic syndrome. So we know that's the abdominal obesity, elevated lipids and blood sugar levels, insulin resistance. And we're definitely getting fatter. So when I started school here, there wasn't a single state in the United States with more than 14% obesity. And by the time I was done, they had to have another new color because everybody had at least 10 to 14%. In 2001, another new color, because the home of deep fried ice cream, managed to achieve 25% obesity saturation. That is 1 out of every 4 people in the state Mississippi that achieved obesity. They weren't to be outdone though. Obesity continued to spread. And in 2012, we got absolute proof that the Center for Disease Control was populated by optimists, because although nobody had achieved the much desired 35% obesity saturation, they were so confident in the American people that they put it on the legend. And sure enough, in 2013, another breakthrough. And of course, it's gone up every year since then. It's not just in the United States, it's worldwide. There's more people dying from dietary excess than deficiency. But as an American, I'm proud to say that when it comes to achieving obesity, we're number one. We do a better job than anybody else in the world in this contest to see who can get the fattest and the sickest. And it's interesting to note in Asia right now, there's only about 3% obesity. It's like they're not even trying. We're increasing our fatness, but we're also increasing the diseases associated with overweight, including diabetes. Diabetes, interesting, if you look at the correlation coefficients between increasing obesity and increasing diabetes, the incidence, there's almost a 1-to-1 correlation. It's almost like there's some type of connection. So what we're doing about it as a country is we're selling health food. You know, olive oil and red wine and dark chocolate. Interesting, I was just looking this up. Dark chocolate, there's about 140 articles in the literature talking about dark chocolate. About 100 of them were sponsored by the Mars Candy Company. And surprisingly enough, they virtually all come out with positive results. The others don't have such a rosy picture. The use of coffee, animal products, the Atkins paleo diets, that's what people agree. Of course, what we should be doing is promoting healthy foods, which have almost no relationship to health food, but of course there's not probably as much money in that. So we know that in the world of our ancient ancestors, humans had a great deal of difficulty getting enough to eat, not getting eaten. The vast majority of humans never reproduced. So they didn't pass on their DNA, which means all those people that died are not your relatives. They're the losers. Your relatives were the winners, the few that got enough to eat and successfully passed on their DNA. Now, humans survived. We had tools, we had fire, we developed language about 100,000 years ago. These were all really powerful tools that allowed us to survive. But even though we survived, we still had a relatively small population. In fact, 70,000 years ago, they said humans almost went extinct after an Indonesian volcano blew up and global warming was an issue. If we look at a timeline, we see that humans got bigger, our brains got bigger, until about 100,000 years ago, when Neanderthals and humans both populated the planet. Neanderthals bit the dust. Our modern human ancestors survived. And in that little blip of biological time here, that's just about 100,000 years, there's been, according to anthropologists, very little change in, for example, brain size or function. Modern brain, ancient brain would be identical, which means the brain in your head is the same brain as in the head of a human about 100,000 years ago. Your same behavioral tendencies, your same inclinations. If you took a child from today to 100,000 years ago, or vice versa, from 100,000 years ago to today, nobody could tell the difference. That child would be just as obnoxious as a kid, just as ornery as a teenager. And that has profound implications, because the way our brains are designed was for an environment of scarcity. That's the brain in your head. And that's kind of what people through most time would have eaten things that look like that. But now we live in an environment of abundance, and food is processed in places that look like this. And diet looks like that. This is the types of things that your patients are going to be eating. And there's a consequence. The way the brain directs the body is largely neurochemical. Dopamine is the dominant chemical. It's associated with the experience you know of pleasure. The more dopamine, the more pleasure. Foods, for example, taste good to a large extent because they stimulate dopamine production in the brain, which makes you feel good. So it's not surprising that the two natural behaviors associated with dopamine production and pleasure response are the two behaviors necessary for survival and reproduction: food and sex. Food and sex are the only natural concentrated stimulants of dopamine, unless, of course, you're a male human, then it's entirely different. But whether it's food and sex or sex and food, the idea is these normal natural stimulants of dopamine work for us, work for all animals we share the planet with, are keeping us alive and reproducing. We've discovered, though, there's artificial stimulants of dopamine, things like alcohol, things like crack cocaine. In fact, cocaine's really amazing. If you cannibalize the rats' brains and give it access to cocaine, they'll continue to press them with light until they're dead. They won't stop for anything. If you quantify it and you figure out how much dopamine is secreted in the brain when you have an orgasm during sex versus smoking cocaine, there's 10 times as much dopamine secreted smoking cocaine. I was giving a lecture in LA some years ago. Older woman in the audience, maybe 80, 85, white-haired lady. She stood and she said, "Excuse me, Dr. Goldhamer, where do I get cocaine?" That's not the point. Now, if that was the end of the story, we'd say, don't use drugs, drugs are bad, whatever. The problem is there's also chemicals that you can add, for example, to feed. If you put this feed in animals, for example, rats, and you give one set of rats that feed without the chemicals and give them ad libitum exposure, they'll get to a certain size. And if you take the same kind of rats with the same feed, and you put these chemicals in the feed, the rats will increase their weight 49% in 60 days. Now, do you think the rats are getting fat because of psychological reasons or biological reasons? Did this rat have stress? Maybe mommy rat didn't love him enough? Daddy rat loved him too much? Or do you think it's biological, the artificial stimulation of dopamine in the brain from chemicals added to the feed? And what if we put those same chemicals like this, yeah, it's sugar, into human diets? We do that. In fact, humans consume in industrialized countries about 150 pounds a year of this chemical. And high fructose corn syrup, a heavily federally subsidized version of it, we've increased consumption 1,000% since 1986. But we don't know why everybody's getting so fat. It's a complete mystery. Another chemical that you all recognize could also be put into feed. It doesn't exist in nature in a concentrated form. It's oil. What's even worse about oil is that we heat it up at high temperature and use it to soak up the grease into perfectly otherwise healthy products like potatoes, called potato chips or French fries. I tell my patients, instead of eating fried foods, they should just find the deep fryer and stick their head in it and suck. That's what we're doing when we're eating those fried foods. And it's affecting our population, our children, increased diabetes in an epidemic proportion. 93% of all the calories consumed by your average patient will either be animal foods, meat, fish, valleys, and dairy products, or highly processed chemicals, salt, oil, and sugar. It's called the pleasure trap. It involves artificially stimulating dopamine in the brain, and that's why people are fat, sick, and miserable, and developing the disease of dietary excess, in my opinion. Right now, a significant percentage of the conditions you're going to treat have to do with metabolic syndrome. So high blood pressure, diabetes, autoimmune disorders, and lymphoma. These are the conditions that are going to be dominating in your practices. And if your patients are treated allopathically, they're going to be given drugs. And they're going to be told to take those drugs for how long? Forever. Once you're on high blood pressure medications, they'll be told you're going to be on those drugs for the rest of your life. You'll be on medication for diabetes forever. Because what medicine is promising your patients is that if they do what they're told, they'll never get well. They'll be sick for the rest of their life, guaranteed. There is a different and an alternative way to approach it. When you have really sick patients, for example, patients that we see whose blood pressure is 240 over 140, they're capped on medications, you probably are not going to say, I'm going to give you an acupuncture needle, some manipulative therapy, some physical therapy, some exercise, or some relaxation, and expect to see those blood pressures drop 100 milligrams per cent. Or, excuse me, 100 points, millimeters. You have to bring out the big guns for really sick people. And what are the big guns? What are the big guns available to you in your practice? And naturopaths call it nature cure. Chiropractors talk about diet, sleep, exercise, and fasting. Because those are the things that you can do to actually get people well instead of telling them they're going to have to be sick the rest of their life. And that they're never going to recover, and that they're suffering the consequences of the treatment. These are all readily available tools to us that are the most powerful tools that are available in treating these diseases of dietary excess. And I want to specifically talk about fasting. You'll read a lot about fasting now, particularly Walter Longo's work is coming out. They're talking about intermittent fasting, narrowing the feeding windows so people don't eat before a certain time or after a certain time, so they have a 14 or 16 hour period of fasting every day. Reducing calorie intake, maybe 600 calories once or twice a week. And these can be very useful for facilitating weight loss. No problem with intermittent fasting. It's not what I'm talking about today, which is water-only fasting for periods of 5 to 40 days. This is the complete absence of all substances except water in an environment of complete rest. It's not starvation. First you have fasting, you fast, labile reserves are depleted. That goes on for about 70 days in humans. After that you begin starvation, and then you die. So don't do starvation, because it would be really bad for our data. Patient selection is important. Not everybody's a candidate for fasting, and that's where the things you learn here, like medical history, physical exam, and laboratory, are necessary, particularly with fasting, because you need to be able to establish a reliable baseline so you can tell the difference between a problem and a good thing. Healing crisis that's generated by the body, and a problem, deterioration, or depletion. Relative contraindications of fasting include things like pregnancy and severe kidney disease or cardiac instability, porphyria deficiency, cachexia depletion, medium chain acetyl enzyme A dehydrogenase deficiency, and patients that you can't stabilize off medications. The reason for that is because all of the adaptive processes of fasting can become a limiting factor. Fasting duration ranges from 5 to 40 days. Average fasting is 1 to 3 weeks, and some patients do require multiple fasts. At this point, we don't have enough reliable non-invasive biomarkers to determine exactly how long a patient should fast, so fasting ends up being a diagnostic tool as well as a therapeutic intervention. I'd like to share with you a case report. This is a 42-year-old patient who came in with follicular lymphoma stage 3. So she's got externally palpable cancer lesions upper and lower extremity. She'd been well worked up, followed for 2 years at Stanford. She had her excisional biopsy. There wasn't any debate or question about her diagnosis. With follicular lymphoma, the treatment, medical treatment kind of sucks. It doesn't prolong life particularly. There's a lot of side effects. So typically it's not unusual to delay treatment until kind of a last-ditch effort. And in this case, the patient had deteriorated to the point where her physician had suggested that it was time to go under chemotherapy. She'd asked the doctor what about dietary changes. He assured her that diet had nothing to do with lymphoma. She asked him about fasting. He said that would be criminal quackery. She went to the oncologist, who told her that diet had nothing to do with lymphoma. Fasting would not be effective in her condition. And given that tremendous medical support, she decided to come to us. We fasted her consecutively on water-only fasting for 21 days, during which time her tumors disappeared. So we fed her for 10 days. We sent her back to the oncologist with some coaching, because we knew we wanted to get follow-up CT scans, which we knew that we'd be reluctant to do. She said he examined her. He was trying to find the lesions. He was looking at the chart, looking at her picture. He asked her what happened, and she said, well, I went to the chiropractor and went on a water fast, and all the tumors disappeared. And he said, that's interesting, I'll have to give him a call. And she asked about a follow-up CT scan, which he denied. Said that she didn't need a CT scan. She said she wanted to objectify the outcome. He said she didn't need to objectify the outcome. He'd been in practice 25 years, and he could assure her that she was better. She asked him if there couldn't be some cancer lurking just beneath the surface. He finally agreed to do the CT scan. Told her that she was still slightly neutropenic and that he would like to do some gentle chemotherapy. She denied the chemotherapy. At 3 months, her white count had normalized. At a year, we got follow-up data, follow-up CT scans, and decided to write a case report. So we ultimately submitted to the British Medical Journal, who initially raised some concerns and questions, but ultimately we provided enough information that they agreed to publish the paper. Before we did that, I wrote to that oncologist and I said, dear Dr. So-and-so, thank you so much for all the confidence you showed in referring your patient for chiropractic care at the True North Health Center and medically supervised fasting. Now that she has, as I'm sure you expected, gone into full remission, we would like to invite you to sign on. Sign on. Yes, go off with the paper. I was hoping that might be him calling right now, but no, it's been 2 years. He hasn't responded yet. But we do have a 2-year follow-up on her. She's completely free of cancer. And each and every one of the ones we've treated her so far has shown significant results. And I'm talking about people coming in with massive splenomegaly. In fact, the most recent patient we just discharged this week was a physician actually with lymphoma, large splenomegaly, objective changes. We'll get some CT follow-ups in about 3 weeks. And we've been seeing it fairly consistently, so we're hoping to put together a cohort clinical trial on the conservative management of this particular condition. If you look at this, one thing you'll notice is she started at 81 kilograms, went to 78, and 69 at the end of fasting, 63 at 6 months, 60 kilograms at 12 months, and this is 59 kilograms at 24 months. What does that imply that she was doing? Sticking to the diet. Yeah, because that's what happens as you control the weight. I just gave I presented this in Washington, D.C. at about 800 physicians at a continuing seminar. Afterwards, the oncologist came up and said they were all impressed that the patient got well, but what they couldn't really believe was we got her to stick to that diet. Got her to stick to a whole plant food, salt, oil, sugar-free diet for 2 years. And they wanted to know what was the secret to getting a patient to stick to the diet. I told them it was super sticky duct tape. So that's some CTs before and after. So you got pretty obvious changes here. That's not supposed to be there. Yeah. 2 years. Okay, so I also currently high blood pressure, leading cause of death and disability. Majority of patients you see, this is how you can treat it: 1, 2, 3, up to 5 medications. Medications have some serious limitations. It's not just chronic fatigue, impotence, and it's also death, which is why you don't give people hypertensive meds until they reach a certain level of hypertension, because the death rate from the drugs is higher than the background rate from moderate hypertension. What we do know that works, though, is losing weight, getting on a vegetarian diet, not drinking alcohol, which turns out to not health food. Exercise, drugs work, but with a price. Reducing sodium aggressively, less than half a milligram of sodium per calorie, works very well. And we did a study with T. Colin Campbell from Cornell University where we took 174 consecutive patients with high blood pressure, and 174 people achieved pressure low enough to eliminate the need for medication. If you look at just stage 3 hypertensives, those with 180 or higher blood pressure, they dropped their blood pressures an average of 60 points, not counting the fact that they started on meds and ended off meds. That's the largest effects ever shown in the scientific literature in treating high blood pressure in humans. It was published in JPT a while ago. We also published a second paper in JCM looking at borderline hypertension with similar results. Basically, everybody with essential hypertension is willing to do really dangerous and radical things like eat good and exercise and go on a water-only fast to normalize their blood pressure and eliminate the need for medication. And those that are willing to stick to that type of a diet, that whole plant food SOS-free diet, can sustain it. And we've got patients now that have sustained it for 30 years. I just did my first 30-year follow-up on the patient. Comes in, he's now 85, he was 55 at that time with severe cardiovascular disease. He told me that the diet seems to be working because he's still working. And everybody he knows is dead. We had 6 years ago, we saw a dentist who had a traumatic brain injury, who got hit in the head with a pole, developed TBI, traumatic brain injury, had chronic cephalgia, had gone through manipulative therapy, medications, all kinds of medical interventions. Unsuccessfully, she had constant daily head pain at 6 to 8 out of 10 for 16 years. Long story short, comes in and fasts, 41-day water-only fast, recovers, refeeds for 6 months, fasts the second time for 40 days. 2 months ago, we got her 6-year follow-up. She's been without head pain for 6 years. We completed recently a fasting safety study because it was difficult to get human subjects committees to approve water-only fasting. They thought the mortality rate would be too high. We took 5 years of consecutive patients, used the common terminology criteria for adverse events from the National Cancer Institute, rated these patients, which included 9,570 total inpatient days. They had achieved complaints that ran the gamut. And in those wide variety of patients, we had no deaths, so no category 5 events, and we had 1 category 4 event, which turned out to be actually a low sodium level that was easily solved. We put her on intravenous feeds. But of the category 3 complications, interestingly enough, 95 of those 310 were hypertensive results. And you might wonder, why would hypertension come up in fasting when it seems to be so effective in treating high blood pressure? Of course, it doesn't. What happens, the way these studies work is every day your patient has a blood pressure above 160 is considered an adverse event. So if they come in with blood pressure of 240, and the next day it's 220, and then it's 200, and then it's 180, and then it's 170, each one of those days is considered an adverse event, even though obviously clinically it's desirable. And so I'm sure when this paper is published, which will hopefully be very shortly, it's gone through review now, somebody will release things saying, fasting causes high blood pressures. In fact, it doesn't. And what this safety study will do is it will allow us and other researchers that are interested in doing long-term water-only fasting to be able to get through human subject reviews, because the conclusion is that the majority of adverse events were mild to moderate, they're expected, there are known complications of fasting, and that when you follow the protocols that we've set up, fasting is in fact safe. How are we doing time-wise? I have a few more minutes, okay. So I want to go through very quickly some mechanisms, because what I've just said is a little bit bizarre. I've said that the leading cause of death and disability, hypertension, as well as the metabolic syndrome, diabetes, and autoimmune diseases, and even some forms of cancer are better treated with water-only fasting and a plant-based diet than any other treatment that's been demonstrated. How could that possibly be? Water fasting is associated with weight loss. It averages about 1 pound a day. What percentage of patients do you expect that undergo water-only fasting lose weight? Yeah, all of them. Physics and thermodynamics tell you that's what's going to happen. Also, 100% of them go through natriuresis, selective elimination of sodium from the body, which proves to be very helpful if you have patients with edema or hypertension, because the excess fluid that's collected as a consequence of excess sodium exposure is diuresed. So blood volumes drop, blood pressures drop, swelling, edema clear, non-healing wounds start to heal. The traditional justification of fasting is detoxification. Are your patients really toxic? Are there really over several hundred different chemicals that you can identify by doing a fat biopsy or by taking cadaver, liquefying, and analyzing? Absolutely. PCBs, dioxin, heavy metals, mercury, all kinds of various materials that accumulate in the body. Interestingly enough, besides direct ingestion of chemicals, the single most common behavior associated with those chemical exposures is the consumption of animal products. Eating meat, fish, fowls, and dairy products, because of the propensity for it to biologically accumulate materials in the tissues of the animals, tells us that a calorie of animal food can have 2 to 1,000 times the concentration as a calorie of plant food. So it's not surprising that the single biggest behavior that your patients engage in that allow for them to accumulate these toxins in their body is insisting on eating animal-based diets. Fasting rapidly mobilizes and eliminates these materials. In fact, it's so rapid, some people have suggested that it's dangerous to do this, unless, of course, you take their proprietary products. And then, of course, it's perfectly fine. Multipotential hematopoietic stem cells, we know that there are sensitive cells, and there's a source of morbidity and mortality, and they're thought to be irreversibly damaged by aging. The sensitivity of hematopoietic stem cells to toxic effects of chemotherapy, major limiting factor in cancer therapy. If you give enough chemotherapy, you kill each and every cancer cell, which you need to do because they'll grow back if you don't. You kill the host. Longo found that in a study he published at USC. 30 rats with cancer, enough chemotherapy to kill every cell, all 30 rats die. Take the same rats with the same cancer and the same dose of chemotherapy, but fast the rats, all 30 rats survive. And according to a paper we published in the 2015 Journal of Metabolism, prolonged fasting represents a profound way to reverse aging of the immune system and enhance cancer treatment. It's based in part by differential stress resistance and differential stress sensitization. Cancer cells don't like the fasting state because they've got high metabolic rates. And healthy cells are protected because of various metabolic factors that happen in fasting. So when you fast an animal that's undergoing cancer treatment, their healthy cells are protected, their cancer cells are more vulnerable to those treatments. And this has inspired some interest from pharmaceutical companies. In fact, one of our studies is being sponsored by a pharmaceutical company because they want to know how are these mechanisms that fasting is reversing these diseases working so that they can come up with fasting mimic drugs. So they want to have a drug that will induce the changes in your body that fasting induces without having to do any of that nasty fasting. According to Goldhamer, a combination of fasting and chemotherapy results in dramatically higher cancer-free survival than chemotherapy alone. It also affects the mitochondrial energy mechanisms inside your cells, and is associated with enhancing antiviral immunity. A lot of these viral infections, these pleomorphic polysaccharide-coating organisms that don't respond to antibiotics or conventional therapy do respond apparently to fasting. According to Longo, in humans, we know that fasting reduces obesity, asthma, arthritis, and high blood pressure. And that high blood pressure evidence he cites is actually our research. I evaluate other researchers' intelligence by how much they agree with me, and so that makes him a genius. Fasting also reduces enzymatic inductions. You don't detoxify without enzymatic factors driving the ship. You also don't mobilize fat or glycogen without enzyme-driven factors. And what happens apparently in fasting is you're reducing these detoxifying enzyme pathways. You not only detoxify more when you're fasting, but those enzyme pathways persist or cannibalized. So just like a trained athlete can cannibalize glycogen mobilizing enzyme pathways, apparently that same type of thing is happening each and every time your patients go through fasting. Some of the intermittent fasting people are trying to argue that just doing a 14-hour fast between breakfast or dinner and breakfast in the morning is enough to induce that. It may be true, but I think it's going to pale in comparison to the results we're seeing with long-term fasting. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Interesting. This is the chemical associated with protecting against Alzheimer's disease. If you have rats in a cage and you give one a wheel and the other doesn't have a wheel, the one that exercises has much lower dementia rates. And they found they have much higher BDNF levels, and they think that there's an association. What's interesting, if you look at each of the biochemical parameters associated with exercise and the beneficial effect it has, they're the same biochemical parameters you see induced in fasting. And it may be, in my mind, that the reason exercise is so helpful is in large part because it helps undo the consequences of dietary excess, as does fasting. Because it's not obvious or intuitive that exercise would induce the same changes that fasting would. It seems like completely different biochemical processes, but over and over again you see the same things happening with exercise showing up in fasting. Fasting reduces insulin resistance. As you know, insulin drives sugar from your bloodstream into the cells. If it doesn't work, if there's resistance to that, we call it diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus is not necessarily being fat, but the diet that makes you fat. The reason I say that is even if you just change the diet radically, long before the fat's gone, insulin resistance starts to drop dramatically. We see that because about 80% of our type 2 diabetic patients, first round, will be able to establish normal blood sugars without medications. And if they're willing to stick to a diet and exercise program, they can sustain that. So yes, being fat is an issue, but it's the diet that makes you fat that's the dominant factor. And the moment you change that diet, the fat slowly starts going away with the insulin resistance rapidly starts changing. The gut is a tunnel through the body. Most people think when you swallow something, it's now in your body. It's not. It's going through the body. It doesn't get in the body unless it gets through your mucosal membrane, which works much like the screen, works to keep out flies. Flies can't get through. The holes are too small. Nothing gets through your intestinal mucosa. It's bigger than whatever holes you happen to have. For example, you can't absorb proteins. You can absorb amino acids. You can't absorb large polysaccharide molecules. So you're protected against that unless something damages the intestinal mucosa that causes gut leakage. A source of gut leakage may be free radicals. We see the effect of free radicals in smoking on smokers' face. What nucleus are is across the collagen tissue. Certainly, we know that smoking does more than just cause smokers' face. It does cause more than just cause lung cancer. 80% of smokers, in fact, will never get lung cancer. Because they die from heart disease before they live long enough to grow their tumors. If you could come up with a cigarette that killed everybody from heart disease first, you could, advertise it as cancer safe? What are sources of free radicals besides smoking? How about drinking? Yeah, peroxidation of alcohol. Why do you think people get cirrhosis of the liver? It's a scar tissue as a consequence of free radical exposure from alcohol consumption. Fatty foods, all the oils and fried foods and foods that have oil cooked at high temperatures. It's no wonder our patients have gut leakage because they have massive amounts of free radical exposure in their gut that they're not designed or equipped to be able to handle effectively. The autonomic nervous system that controls everything you don't think about. If you go out and run and your heart doesn't speed up, you die from ischemia. You don't have to think about it. Your autonomic or automatic nervous system speeds it up. Parasympathetic, sympathetic tone has to be in balance. As chiropractors, we know we can affect that tone. In fact, that may be a large part of why people get symptomatic relief from all natural therapies, whether it's manipulative therapy or physical therapy or acupuncture or homeopathy. A lot of these natural remedies that we utilize to manipulate symptoms have their mechanism of action through effect on the autonomic nervous system. And I'll tell you something, the most powerful way of rebooting the autonomic nervous system I've ever come across is fasting. It's like rebooting the hard drive in a computer. It clears a lot of corruption out. You may not always know exactly what it was and how it was that it did it, but you certainly see the results clinically. It's interesting that virtually every major religion has a tradition of fasting. The Jews, the Jains, the Hindus, the Muslims, the Christians, everybody's got some fasting tradition because it changes how you think about yourself and how you relate to the world around you. Fasting enhances, not suppresses, the immune system. Every objective measure of immune function, helper killer T cell activity, neutrophil phagocytosis, you name it, enhances during fasting. Things heal in fasting you can't get to heal in the feeding state. And perhaps most interestingly enough is a change in taste and irritation. You can't get patients to eat good foods because good foods taste like crap to them. It's tasteless swell. They can't stand it because they're addicted to the artificial stimulation of dopamine that comes from using salt, oil, and sugar processed foods. But in fasting, this entire taste mechanism reboots. I always love to tell the story of our first union patient who became a fully covered medical benefit for the International Union of Operating Engineers. It's a big, powerful labor union. They made anybody in the union, 68,000 members of California, who come to our inpatient facility, undergo care without cost. They would take care of everything. The very first person they sent us was a gentleman that they forgot to tell what the program was. His blood pressure is 240 over 140, capped out on medications. They don't want him driving the trains anymore. They tell him, go to this place, they'll fix you up and you can come back to work. He shows up at our place, looks around and says, I must be in the wrong place. And I said, no, you're right, I got you on the list here, you're here to get well. He said, but I'm not sick. I said, you are sick. You got blood pressure of 240 over 140, you're diabetic, you're obese, you're going to die. And he said, yeah. Well, don't we all have to die? And I said, yeah, but took a different course. I said, you're on $880 a month worth of meds. If we get you healthy, you won't need them. And he said, well, what do I care if my union pays for the drugs? At that point, I realized he was not my normal, self-selected, highly motivated patient. I don't know what to say to him. What happens to your patients who are on a lot of diabetic and hypertensive medications? They develop a little problem, don't they? So I thought, well, I'll try that. I said, hey, you know, if we get you off all those drugs, we might be able to do something about your little problem. When he started to stand up, I thought, uh-oh, because he was a pretty big guy, I know. And he said, why the hell didn't you just say so? Okay, so I'm thinking before I start him on a fast, which I know is going to go on for some weeks, I try to feed him some real food, because this is what his diet was. It wasn't exactly this. I couldn't find a picture of his food. It was this without that disgusting green stuff. He said if they put that on it, he would take that off and throw it away. But I thought if I don't feed him for a little bit before we fast him, I'm going to have to disinfect him with this from, 3 weeks from now when we come off the fast. So I thought, okay, we'll give him some food, and we do. And he's eating the food, but he's like, and I'm thinking, oh my God, maybe we missed, he's got a tumor or something. Because he can't swallow it. And I said, it looks like you're having trouble with the food. And he said, what food? He said, that's not food. He said, that stuff you gave me is disgusting. He said, if I have to eat tasteless swill like this, I'd rather just die. He said, why don't you go out to my truck and get my 12 gauge, and when I'm not looking, just shoot me in the head. So we checked him in. Fasted in 26 days, normalized his blood pressure and blood sugar, and afterwards we're feeding him the same food. He said, yeah, your damn chef's finally getting the hang of it. It took 20 minutes to convince him it was the same food. He said, no, that stuff you gave me when I came was disgusting. This guy wouldn't have complied for a meal if I sent him home with a piece of paper. Because I was able to lock him up, control his environment. I saw him 6 months later at semi-annual, we were doing blood pressure screenings through the union. And I said, how you do something? Doing just fine. Summary, fasting decreases glucose and IGF-1. IGF-1 is insulin growth factor 1 associated with aging. It decreases blood pressure, heart rate, insulin, inflammation, oxidation, drops total microbial load. Remember, you have an organ in your body you're not thinking about. It's the microbiome. 5 pounds of bacteria. Living organism. Giving off poop. If you feed your gut microbiota meat, you get TMA, which becomes TMAO, which is toxic and creates heart disease and cancer. You feed your microbiota soluble fibers, plant-based fibers, you end up with vitamin K and fertilizer. You want the 5 pounds of bacteria in your gut giving you fertilizer, not toxic waste. You can profoundly reboot the gut microbiota with fasting and getting people on a plant-based diet. We're doing work right now with Washington University, Luigi Fontana. We're taking people, we've just done this, taking them before, after fasting, do the breakdowns. They can measure the number of mutations in B lymphocytes before and after fasting, the efficiency of autophagy, all kinds of interesting biomarkers. Very fascinating stuff, all virgin data. Fasting increases leptin and satiety hormone. After fasting, you think your patient's going to go gain weight because they're going to eat everything. They don't, because their normal satiation mechanisms have been rebooted. It increases insulin sensitivities. We talked about cell stress, cellular stress resistance and adaptation. It increases autophagy, the actual ability of the body's immune system to function. It normalizes the gut microbiome, stimulates B-cell immunity, and it reverses the major abnormalities associated with metabolic syndrome, which is what are making people fat, sick, and miserable. If you have any questions, I'd like to try to answer those any time. Yes?
On average, how many days do your patients go through that awful feeling of fasting because your body's starting to normalize?
Fasting can be an intense and miserable experience, but two things. If you get people to prep properly before fasting by getting them on a plant-based SOS-free diet, first you can minimize the amount of distress they have. Most of the stress is withdrawing with medications, coming off of caffeine, alcohol, and animal-based diets. If you get them on plant-based diets first, fasting can be a relatively pleasant experience. The first few days, there's a little bit of your mouth will coat up and taste like something crawled in there and died, and you can have some nausea, irritability, and orthostasis, and some skin rashes, and then that goes away, and then you get some low back pain, and you can get other symptoms. The whole process can be rather entertaining. The good news is that people get through it and get well, they forgive you for anything. Okay? So, depends on the patient, depends how the prep is. Usually the first few days are the worst part, and then it gets relatively more pleasant. Yes?
What do you do to clear their bowel while they're...
Well, what we do before they fast, we get them on a plant-based SOS-free diet. Their bowels are moving spontaneously before we initiate fasting, and then you don't have to do anything. Now, we do have a colon hydrotherapist that becomes an issue, but it's only 1% of patients that we have to do any intervention. Even during fasting, if there's enough material to accumulate, the bowels will move spontaneously. So we don't have to do any intervention. We're better off usually not. But the key there is good preparation. If the guy's eating a chicken cheeseburger, you better do something, or you're going to have some pretty good rocks that you have to take out, when they come off the fast. Yes?
It's kind of a two-part question. If you were doing it not at your clinic, would you suggest people taking some sort of supplementation?
I recommend water-only fasting be done in a controlled setting under the supervision of doctors that are trained in utilizing it, because it gets really interesting and entertaining if it's not done right. Now, there's other things you can't do outpatient. Juice fast, modified fasting, intermittent fasting, whole different topic. So lots of things, but this water-only, prolonged water-only fasting isn't something that's going to be done outpatient any more than you do appendectomy outpatient. You could talk somebody through it on the internet, but you wouldn't have as good an outcome. Water-only fasting is really better done in a controlled setting under direct supervision. We've been able to demonstrate that it can be done safely because of the steps that are taken. Once you come into a rotation, you'll see what's involved. You'll see why that is done inpatient.
And also, when you are, testing the before and after weight, do you know if there's a larger difference in fat loss compared to protein loss?
Yeah, by the end of the second week of fasting, almost all the calories mobilized are from fat, because that's part of the adaptation to fasting state. I didn't have time to get into the whole physiological stuff, but any of you that are interested, take one of my cards, email me. I'll send you chapter 37 out of the textbook of naturopathic medicine, which we edited, and that has all the physiological breakdown. We've also got a bunch of links to study that we published. We have a great website, healthpromoting.com. There's a learning channel. If you can play this one little clip here. So while he's setting that up, there's a 30-second clip I'd like to show you, because it really brings home the point of what we're trying to talk to about with patients. You're not going to live forever, but you can live until you die. And as chiropractors, we should be more aware of that than just about anybody. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question about patients that are on medications. And,
yes.
What you are constantly monitoring. Is that what I understand?
Well, we're going to get people stabilized off most medications before we start water fasting. So we're going to wean them off their steroids and wean them off their pain medications. We might do that with modified fasting or other things that you can medicate on, but you don't generally medicate on a water fast, except true replacement therapies like thyroid replacement therapy. We may reduce those dosages, but we're going to have people stabilized off most medications before we actually start the water-only fast. Otherwise, you get into big potential problems. Let's run this clip if we can.
Will you grow old with vitality? Or get old with disease? It's time to decide.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, what percentage of your patients receive chiropractic treatment versus just fasting, or do you?
Every patient that needs chiropractic care gets chiropractic care. So we have 5 chiropractors on our staff that are spent busy doing it. I have to tell you though, a lot of these patients, we joke amongst the chiropractors, you better treat them right away, because by the time they're done resting and fasting and doing all this stuff, a lot of stuff clears itself out. And we're teaching yoga, body use, postural stuff, fitness training. It's all part of this brainwashing campaign that we're putting people through. We put them through the cooking classes. Because ultimately, unless they do the exercise, unless they use their body properly, unless they eat the diet, you can't sustain anything you do, whether it's fasting or manipulative therapy. A lot of patients come in, they have problems that have a mechanical basis, and they're going to get chiropractic care. But I'll tell you what, you treat patients that have gone through fasting and made dietary changes, it's like a completely different patient. You treat some patients, you have to be careful. If you're too aggressive, they get sore, there's all kinds of problems. These people you can do anything to, it's unbelievable, because they don't have the inflammatory stuff. It's not the same experience. In fact, I don't even like adjusting outpatients now. I want them all to have gone through this process, and it makes you look so much more effective, and you can do so much in so much less time. Because so much of the problem we run into isn't getting joint mobility reestablished, it's dealing with the inflammatory consequences, and this helps with that. So it really spoils you, though, as a chiropractor, because, it's I admire people that are willing to work with people outpatient basis on and on and on, and just like, because they never really respond the same way as when you make your diet and lifestyle changes. Yes?
I assume insurance doesn't cover this.
It does cover we have all insurance, including Medicare. We have 5 full-time medical doctors on our staff. So every patient that's coming in is having a medical evaluation and an exit exam. That would be reimbursed by Medicare or any health insurance that would reimburse any physician for anything. Lab, 100% is reimbursed by any insurance that covers things. So the daily rate at the center, which in our facility is $149 a night for a private room, with share bath, all meals or fasting supervision, twice daily visits with the staff doctors, all their educational programs, all the classes, it's all included, includes fees and taxes, is not covered. However, if you cut all their organs out, I think you could probably get it reimbursed. So we've made the price point low enough. We're a 501c3 nonprofit research organization. We get a lot of subsidy monies. We have a low enough price point that many people can afford to come in and spend the 2 or 3 or 4 weeks that they need to actually overcome the condition.
$149 a night?
$149 a night is their cost to stay at the center. Their exam and lab is normally reimbursed by insurance.
And that includes food?
Includes everything. I have businessmen that stay with us when they're in town because it's cheaper to stay with us than the hotel in town, and they get all their meals and they can attend the classes.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, no, nobody ever criticized us on the price point. We're like by a factor, we're a quarter of the cost of any equivalent inpatient facility. And it's the only chiropractic run inpatient facility that I know of in the country. So it's a really unique situation.
Whoa, look at all those recipes. Those look tasty. Give me some of that.